Hey guys, Toku Nerd here with another deck profile, and this time it'll be True Dracos. I've been testing this deck on Yugo Pro, and it's pretty good. I actually just tested it today at locals, and it's pretty powerful with its abilities to pop any card on the field whenever, like, let's say Masterpiece is summoned. And I wanted to get this deck profile out, to help anybody who was, who needed maybe like a profile or another profile to, help them out with building theirs. And so let's get into this one. So, first off, you gotta run 3 of Masterpiece, of course. He is your ace of the deck. His effect is essentially when you tribute for him, every True Draco card, including him and all the other ones that were just released recently in Maximum Crisis, their abilities allow them to be tributed, summoned, using continuous spell or trap cards, which most True Draco decks run completely. So essentially, his ability allows him to be immune to anything that he was just tribute summoned with. So if you were to tribute a monster and a spell, he'd be immune to a monster and spell. If he was a spell and trap card, he'd be immune to spell and trap cards. And then his secondary ability is what basically makes him the most broken card out at the moment. Essentially, any continuous spell and trap card in the graveyard, you can banish it and then use his effect to target a card and destroy it instantly. And since he is like a Chain Link 2 or something, or whatever his effect is a quick effect, he can essentially just kill a monster once it's summoned immediately and its effect semi gets negated. I'm not exactly too sure yet. As I said, I just finished building this deck, so I'm still in the processes of testing it, and most of the time he can block stuff, but occasionally he can be destroyed. It's just depending on what you tribute him for. Okay, then, of course, with these 3, then, of course, you have to run 3 Dynamite Knights. These guys, he's one of your main searchers. I mean, all your other True Dracos also search, but his I usually depend on the most, because whenever he's tribute summoned, as I mentioned before, all True Dracos can be summoned using continuous spell and trap cards, right? Well, when he's summoned with that, anytime your opponent activates anything, and I mean anything, he can pop out a continuous spell and trap card from the deck, and you can either add it to your hand, or B, just activate on the field immediately. And let's say you have like a Dreas or a Ignis, the True Draco Knight or whatever, you can revive him in defense mode using a True King. Let's say I activate True King's Return. I can special summon using that card and bring out another card, or get out True Draco Apocalypse and tribute immediately. So his effect is one of the best ones in the deck, so you gotta run 3. Absolutely. Then for the 2, I have 2 Majesty Maidens. Her effect is to essentially search out any True Draco or True King monster from your deck, and essentially you use her to bring out Masterpiece, essentially. Or if you want to do a more defensive thing, I usually just bring out Dynamite Knight, and then on the next turn after Dynamite Knight's out, then I go for Masterpiece with her. And of course, she also gets the boost from Dragonic Diagram, so she goes up to like 26. So she's a pretty good beater to get over stuff. Same with Dynamite Knight. These are basically your main. These are the main 3 that you want to have in your deck. Then I run, of course, 1 Marianne, the True Draco Phoenix. She's pretty good too. I mean, I usually just use her to pop for a Dragonic Diagram, but if you can get her initial effect off, which is if I destroy 2 other monsters in your hand and or field, that includes a wind monster, she can be summoned, and then she can mill like the top 4 cards of your opponent's deck. So if you can actually get her first effect off, she's really broken. But you usually use her for the second effect. When she's destroyed by card effect, you can add 1 true or 1 worm type monster from your deck to your hand, and you can only use this once per turn. But this can essentially net you any of the True Dracos, since they're all worm types. So most decks I've seen run at least 1 of these. So and I can see why, because it's pretty good if you combo it with Dragonic Diagram. Then for a few more one-offs, Ignis, of course. Not many people run Ignis for some reason, but He's actually pretty good. His ability allows him to basically add one True Draco spell card. Like, so essentially, if you want to get out True Draco Heritage or maybe Disciples of the True Draco Phoenix, he's your go-to for that. And I also really like his artwork, so I tend to go for guys like that because he looks really sweet. And he's a fire type too, so that's pretty cool. And then the last monster, Dreas the Third, the True Draco Cavalry General. I only one of him, but his effect is pretty busted, so I could replace Ignis with another one of him. So either way, but his effect is pretty cool. He basically makes it so nobody can target any of your other True Dracos except for him. But then when he is destroyed or whatever, he leaves the field in any possible way, he can special summon essentially any True Draco or True King, whatever, and you can just bring it out in defense mode. It's kind of has the same effect as True King's Return, but in a monster form essentially. But it's not once per turn either. It's only when he's destroyed. And that's basically, these are all the monsters. And so let's move on to the spell card lineup, which consists of, first off, 3 Dragonic Diagrams. And yes, I know people in the comments are going to be like, oh, well, you're not using English ones. Well, the English ones are about $54 at the moment of this recording, so I'm using these as proxies at the moment until I get an extra 2 because I only have 1. So, yeah. Dragonic Diagram. This card is basically your deck because its ability, you can tribute 1 card from your hand and or field. Anything. It doesn't have to be True Draco, it can just be anything. And then you can use that to search your deck for anything that is True Draco or True King. And its secondary effect, it also adds on a 300 attack and defense bonus to any True Draco or True Kings, which is pretty good, but its other ability is where it shines. It actually helped me win a duel earlier. Essentially what happens is that while attributed monster is on the field, it cannot be destroyed. So essentially you're like, oh, I summoned it, and then your opponent's like, I'm going to kill it. No, this activates, you still take the damage, but the monster's still there, and it's perfect because then the next turn you can tribute that monster and summon out Masterpiece and basically just destroy their field by popping other stuff. So you absolutely need 3 at 3, no exceptions. This is like a crucial card. Then, of course, standard, 3 terraformings to search the Dragonic Diagram, of course. Then you run 3 Draco Heritages because this card will essentially be the card that will search for you because every time you pitch a True Draco card or anything from Dragonic Diagram, this allows you to draw 1 card for it. So essentially, as long as you're still in your main phase, you can just keep drawing cards if you're popping a ton of True Draco cards. Then, after that, you have 3 Disciples of the True Draco Phoenix. This card, I don't really use its effect that often, but it is a pretty good effect. I can target 3 True Draco and True King cards in my graveyard, and then I can shuffle them back in my deck, then I draw 1 card. I occasionally use this effect, but you usually want to keep all your continuous spell and traps in the graveyard for Masterpiece to use. But when you need that card, like maybe you want to draw into the Masterpiece, this is a perfect card for that. And usually it's good for popping. I forgot to mention that essentially all the True Draco spell cards pop a spell or trap card when they leave the field. So when you tribute for your True Draco monsters, you can pop spell and trap cards with these, or any of the ones like the True Draco's cards I just showed you. Then, after these cards, I run 3 Pots of Duality. Surprisingly, this deck can actually use Pot of Duality, which is weird because most people don't run it anymore because of that special summon clause that doesn't allow you to do that for a turn. But with True Draco, since they don't special summon unless they're being revived, this basically helps you search the deck too. Just like it's basically kind of like a secondary Dragonic Diagram, but it only nets you 3. But at the same time, if you play this, you get to see the top 3 cards of your hand, and you can choose exactly what you want. So it eliminates the chance of drawing into it with, Disciples. So it kind of guarantees at least maybe a good card that you can add to your hand and potentially win the game. Then after that, you have two twin twisters, of course. They're a staple. You absolutely need these to take care of annoying back rows, like maybe monarchs running their primes or whatever. Then after that, two dark holes. This is just for coverage against Zodiacs, because Zodiacs are really huge in the meta right now. These basically wipe their field. Most of the time, they do not have a response whatsoever, except for maybe Zodiac Barrage to shuffle stuff back into the deck. But most of the time, this will clear the board, and you can just go in right there and destroy them. Then, final spell card. Upstart Goblin, of course. Yeah, you're giving them 1,000, but you're getting a card, and that card could be Masterpiece and or Dragonic Diagram, so might as well take the risk. And that's all for the spell cards. And for this deck, I actually run a pretty small... Oh, wait, I forgot this. Yeah, Monarch Stormforth. Yeah, this card. This card's pretty busted. It has won me a game, because essentially I played it and summoned Masterpiece, and I just won the game with him and Majesty. So, one of that. And then finally for this trap cards, I only run about 7 cards, but they're really crucial. First off, 3 True King returns. And these things are basically your Monster Reborn of the deck. They are pretty busted, because all of the spell and trap cards of almost all the True Draco cards, except for Heritage and maybe one other, they have a secondary clause that says during your opponent's main phase you can tribute a card and tribute summon, essentially. But this one is mainly, as I've seen so far, is used mainly for special summoning back True Dracos that are destroyed in battle, and then they are summoned in defense mode. This card essentially kind of helps stall. Like, let's say your opponent destroys one of your True Dracos, and you're like, oh no, I can't block their attack. Well, activate this face down, boom, your monster's back, it's in defense mode, and you're not going to take any damage until maybe the next turn. Plus, if you have Dragonic Diagram on the field, it semi-protects him, sort of. It gives them like an extra 300, but since it's special summon, it doesn't get the tribute effect. But this at least covers you for like the end of your opponent's turn if they plan to destroy you or something. Okay, and then after True King, you run 3 True Draco Apocalypse. This one, it's essentially the same, and you can target... this one essentially has an effect where you can target one other True Draco or True King, and you can destroy it, and if you do, all of your opponents, or of all face-up monsters your opponent controls, become half their current attack and defense, even if this card leaves the field. So essentially, let's say your opponent has a really powerful monster, right? You can pop one of your monsters and have all their attacks. And then even if they have something boosting their attack, they're not going to be able to jump through and hit all of your True Dracos and kill them. So essentially, this one kind of is more of like a protection. And then, of course, when it leaves the field, all of these traps pop a monster. Any monster. Just target a monster and destroy it. And of course, this one has also the secondary effect of True King's Return as well, where you can summon up, tribute summon during your opponent's turn. And then for the last few, I have 2 Quaking Mirror Forces. These cards are crucial nowadays because when your opponent's attacking, you can block it, make their monsters useless like generic cards, and then you can just swing for game and win most of the time. Or, stall for a little bit more. And that's essentially my entire True Draco deck, actually, because this deck is specifically built for the new Link format coming out in about a few weeks. And essentially, this one relies nothing on extra monsters. I mean, I could if I wanted to. I mean, I could do some maybe XYZs or something, but at what it is now, it's actually pretty decent, and so far I've won about like 3-4 duels in a row, and it's actually pretty good. There are a few flaws. Of course, every deck does. If your opponent takes care of Dragonic Diagram, or you brick really bad, because this deck is, as you can see, it's very spell and trap card heavy. Well, mainly spells. Yeah, it's spell heavy, and you have a very limited amount of monsters, as you can see here. So you have to be very strategic with these cards, but at the same time, you don't have to, because there's just so much of them. But it's still a decent deck, it's perfect for if you don't want to be using an extra deck, because this new style that almost all the cards releasing in Maximum Crisis, most of them don't have to run an extra deck. So during link format, they'll be really good and probably, top a few tournaments or so. This one's already in top tournaments, especially in the World Championship. So you could run them, but the downside, the one con about this deck is the price. Most of these cards are pretty cheap, but the one that will run you the most money is Masterpiece. Each one at the time of this recording is $16. I was lucky to get these all by pulling through packs, but that took me about like a month or two since the pack has come out to actually get the 3. The rest have been hit or miss. I just recently got these 3, like the 3 Dynamite Knights, but the rest of them have been pretty easy to pull, especially Ignis and Dreas. But the hardest one is probably Dragonic Diagram. Since I mentioned earlier, I only got one of them out of the entire bunch of packs I bought. I bought a box and a ton of other packs like every week, and I still couldn't pull it. So at this moment, if you want to build this deck, I'd highly recommend waiting probably until August or September before you actually get Dragonic Diagram. Do what I do and get proxies, get like the Japanese official OCG versions, because there's no way you're going to be able to actually get 3 Dragonic Diagrams without burning through at least $150 at this point. It's not too bad if you have the money to drop, but if you don't, you might as well just go for the Japanese ones, because these are all commons in Japan. So you can essentially get all like a play set and just use them. And as long as you're not entering tournaments like regionals, you're fine. So there's always a pros and cons to a deck, especially with a new deck that just came out like this. But it's a really good deck, and I highly recommend trying to build it. It was really fun playing it. That's also one thing about this deck. It's really fun to play. Like, it's always fun to summon out Masterpiece, pop a spell and trap card, and then just suddenly like wipe your opponent's field and hit for like game almost. And then next turn just completely wall them up completely so they can't do anything because of Masterpiece's effect. It's a pretty good deck. So thanks for watching, and I'll be back probably in a week or two with another deck profile and or maybe a new collaboration I've been planning with my friend. So see you next time.